Greetings adventurers, and welcome to the Loot Goblin Marketplace. At what point does a twist in your campaign become so big that it just completely takes you out of the game? I think for many a few twists and turns can be fun, but completely shifting worlds and narrative tone is probably too much for most players. That is why I always try to have a session 0 to establish what kind of themes you can expect at the game table, so players can make characters they feel like would do well in that setting. There is the off chance that both the Dungeon Master and the players are not having fun with the setting that you all agreed to, and the good news is that you guys can always shake things up. Just make sure that everyone is on the same page after turning your grimdark fantasy game into an Isekai slice of life campaign. Otherwise, you'll end up like the players in this story. Today's treasure goes by the name Dungeon Master turns campaign into a slice of life Isekai. Longtime lurker and never thought I'd have to make a post, but here it goes. Before I get into the meat of this, let me quickly introduce some characters. They are myself, the Problem Dungeon Master, a Kitsune, someone named Lazarus, and Will. There were some others who weren't as important, but this is kind of the main cast. I've been friends with Kitsune, Problem Dungeon Master, and Lazarus for a while, and I actually DM for Kitsune and Lazarus myself. We're very close and such. I met Problem Dungeon Master through Kitsune a few months ago, and when I heard she wanted to run a game, I didn't mind joining. You know, the whole forever DM curse thing. I rolled a Cowgirl homebrew, approved by the Dungeon Master that's not too OP, and we began. In hindsight, I should have asked more questions about the world, but that one is on me. I was told this was going to be a beginner's campaign and would have a whole pantheon of gods and worshippers, and I thought that was kind of cool. I decided to have my cowboy not spiritual at all, and would maybe decide who to follow as the game went on. So first red flag was no session 0. We only knew what we were getting into the day of, and after that didn't go over the boundaries at all. All I knew was that it was a typical Dungeons and Dragons adventure, and we were going to be in a world that had bounty hunters, magical creatures, and other typical 5th edition things. Anyway, the first thing that happens is Will, the guy I haven't mentioned yet because he joined the day of, began to eat 2 corpses in the shipwreck. Like full on eating them. Ah yes, a lizard folk player I see. Kitsune, Lazarus, and myself were immediately confused, but we just rolled with it. We ended up at this temple next to where our ship crashed and began to explore it. There was a strange old man maintaining it. It almost seemed to be a plot device so we could move the story along, but not in like the way normal plot hooks are given. This guy was basically shoving us around and the DM literally told us, someone do something irrational. I could tell the Dungeon Master was floundering, so I decided, hey, she's new, I'll do her a solid. So I told her I'd shoot at one of the altars inside of the temple, you know, to move the plot along for the Dungeon Master. Anyway, it turns out the second my character pulled their guns out, the old man took them. No roll to fight it, or at least to keep them. He just instantly took them while I was holding them in front of me. He lectures my character on not desecrating the temple and something about being disappointed in me. Kitsune tried to grab them back and rolled a 23, and the Dungeon Master went, well, you get one of them back, but he knew you were going to grab it, so he moves the other one away. Confused, I asked, if the roll succeeded and the gun was back in Kitsune's hand, how come both can't be retrieved? At this point, my faith was already starting to waver in this game, but don't worry, it gets worse. Remember in the title where it says Isekai? Well, while we're talking, another player decides to show a drawing to an altar of a goddess named Sayori. So a portal opens up in front of this altar and then we all get sucked in, like immediately. This is where the Isekai comes in. We wind up in front of a high school, like from a shipwreck to a literal modern day high school. Lazarus and myself were literally checked out the second we hear this. And Kitsune developed a headache due to the pure WTF 180 that was pulled on us. And I'm not even joking, but Sayori from Doki Doki Literature Club shows up and introduces herself as the goddess she is, and begins taking us to the classroom to learn. By this time, the Dungeon Master is only talking to Will and 2 other people in the party, while myself, Kitsune, and Lazarus are confused, and voicing our opinions about why a cowboy with 3 guns on them is just walking around a high school. Lazarus with a giant sword, and Kitsune, who is literally Kitsune. The Dungeon Master basically has us walk around a high school talking to a principal and secretary about how to get us home. There is no possible way for me to express the absolute sadness Lazarus and Kitsune were feeling at this point. We were all just done and upset that the characters we worked on were now walking around Japan. At this point, Kitsune, myself, and Lazarus haven't been addressed by the Dungeon Master for any interaction for a good 30 minutes. If I was in this situation, I'd be really dumbfounded as well. I don't get why he bothered to do the whole shipwreck into the temple sequence, because obviously he was just going to kind of push you in another world anyways. If you're going to do a weird isekai sequence, why not just have like the ship crash and then like you guys get brought underwater, and the moment you like come up the shore, you're on the coastline of Japan or something? Or hell, maybe even like the high school pool. It's really dumb, but at least it would make more sense like pacing wise here. You got people partially invested in a world that immediately got abandoned, which is like a waste of half a session. And it looks like for the other half of the session, they're just outright ignoring you. I guess for the Dungeon Master here, he doesn't find it weird that there's a cowgirl and a catgirl in a Japanese modern high school. And mattering on what shows he watches, maybe that is totally normal. I would be totally confused just like the author is here. And it looks like there's two other players who are totally confused as well. So clearly there was some kind of miscommunication. If he planned this from the start with a session 0, this all could have been avoided. No one's time would have been wasted. Yeah, there is a chance these 3 players say no and he has to find a couple more players, but at least those players would want to worship Sayori from Doki Doki Literature Club. They also include a few things to add to wrap this up, which is Will is secretly a god of matter and physics in disguise as a mortal for some reason. The Dungeon Master had never actually made a map and was just reacting. I know the struggle, I just was concerned that there wasn't any real planning behind the session. And finally, I literally do not know what this fever dream was. If I came across as a jerk talking shit about a new inexperienced Dungeon Master, I apologize, but none of this was as advertised, and everything felt very rushed and underprepared. There were some points where the Dungeon Master went, shit, I didn't finish this part yet. I know a lot of people are actually good at improvising, and it doesn't really matter if they haven't set stuff up ahead of time, but if you're audibly saying, shit, I didn't finish this part yet, maybe you should have came in with a few more notes and some clear objectives for the campaign. This is a very short story, but I actually picked it because there's another part here in the comments section by Lazarus, another player. Now, obviously Lazarus also isn't a fan of this campaign, but it is really good to see different sides of a story. But before I go any further, I wanted to give D&D Dice a shout out, my favorite dice shop and where half of my paycheck goes to every month. They've got a lot of options, including their original 11-piece dice sets that they call the King of Crits series. Be sure to use the code LootGoblin to support the channel at dnddice.com, or you can just click the link down in that video description and it'll be added when you check out with your favorite dice. As an edgelord myself, my favorite collections are the Plague Doctor and Blood Hunter 11-piece sets, which I use alongside their Tomb of the Lich dice tower. Anyways, back to the video. Lazarus here, just gonna add a bunch of yapping add-on notes to this since the OG post was being written as the session was going on. Oh, so this man was ready to post this horror story. After this part of the session was over, another member of the party, not mentioned here, opened another portal thing to go to an area where their patron god was. Honestly, I was mostly zoned out for this portion, but we all somehow ended up in some giant city for like 5 minutes before the problem Dungeon Master called the session finished for the day, due to sheer lack of foreplanning. Problem Dungeon Master claimed that they had general ideas for the many gods we would interact with, a fact that I highly doubt, except for the 2 specifically that we ended up interacting with in that session, both of which being gods directly worshipped and connected to members in the party. Okay, so that makes me think everyone else in the party besides your 2 friends actually knew that their deities were going to be like these pop culture characters, so clearly he had a conversation with someone, just not you guys. If my current count is correct, the publicly known number of possible gods that we could/can interact with in said campaign is 41. Adding to this previous point, I highly doubt that the problem player had much idea for most, if not any, of the gods available to interact with. And speaking of said gods, most if not all of them are references to external characters or people, Doki Doki Literature Club, Danganronpa, and Epic the Musical, notably not the Greek or Roman gods themselves, seemingly specifically the epic versions of those characters. There was seemingly a severe lack of urgency in general for having characters and ideas finished or at least fleshed out before session 1. As mentioned in the original post, Will didn't make a character or join the campaign until the day of. There's the obvious lack of planning for the session itself, and even on my side, I had forgotten to make my character sheet until the day of the session, and had gotten no repercussions or even warnings about the fact. The main gimmick of my character that had been a one-off comment during a call was the only thing that had been even remotely discussed before the campaign, and it was barely even discussed at all beyond, oh yeah, you have a set 20 intelligence, but can only speak in riddles or you get silenced for like a minute. No discussions of backstory for said knowledge and mechanic, no talk of how the logistics of how it would work, or anything otherwise. Which, to be perfectly honest, that sounds like an awful character idea. I would have a dozen questions on how that would work as the Dungeon Master, and the fact that they kind of just signed off on it and didn't really care probably does mean that they didn't really think on it very much. It really does feel like this campaign is just a bunch of things that they think sound cool that they're throwing together, and they'll figure out the balance of it later on, or maybe not at all. I really can't say if this is a sign that they're inexperienced as a Dungeon Master, because I know people who've been playing campaigns for years that they just kind of go for big hype moments, and if they're a big anime fan, maybe they're trying to farm those more than they're trying to make a cohesive story. But hey, if the other 3 characters that are in the story besides you guys like how that's played, I guess that's fine. I've never really watched an anime and said, you know what, I want that person to be a deity in my pantheon for my next D&D campaign, but hey, you do you, I guess. Adding on to the end of the last point, everyone in the party's gimmicks weren't thought out. Kitsune's gimmick is that they personally know just about all the gods in some capacity or another, but from what I've talked to them about it, they got told just about as much as I was, which was very bare bones despite the whole gimmick involving me having a deep knowledge of them, and had to wing it for their interactions relating to the gods. The character mentioned in the OG post by the author who went to show a drawing to the shrine has a wife stuck in the underworld apparently, and I only knew this because I spoke about it with the problem Dungeon Master before the campaign and how supposedly busted it was. Had a magic paintbrush that can deal every type of damage depending on what sigil they drew with it. The last party member's main gimmick was the fact that they were overly zealous for worshipping their patron god, apparently enough to where the problem Dungeon Master kept calling them occultists, but due to the lack of foresight in planning the interactions with the gods, which was literally all that happened for the entire session mind you, said character had a notable lack of knowledge about specific things in their patron god's domain and what they were called, likely because again, nothing was properly thought through. Okay, besides the edgy paintbrush guy with the dead wife trope going on, the author here and Lazarus both kind of touch upon the fact that the problem Dungeon Master really prides themselves on a pantheon, and yet nothing about it is fleshed out at all. There are at least 3 characters in this campaign that have a gimmick directly tied to interacting with said deities, yet the moment they go to a big city and have to interact with more and more deities, it seems like the session just suddenly ends because there's no foreplanning. I don't want to be too hard on this Dungeon Master here because I think it's just a case of them being new. They overpromised, underdelivered. Half the party seems like a good fit for this kind of campaign. The other half of the party is genuinely confused because there's no rhyme or reason yet. And a lot of Dungeons and Dragons is just vibes from players who get along naturally. The author here, Lazarus, and the Kitsune don't seem to feel like they fit in the campaign, and I totally understand why, because they built characters around a world that existed for like 20 minutes before they were sucked into another one. People really get invested in creating their characters and having them weave into the world, so every time you completely 180 that world, you're gonna have people that feel left behind, and it's totally understandable. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Would you want to play in a campaign that's like an isekai world where all your favorite characters from pop culture, anime especially, could be your patron deity? I'm sure there's probably a better system out there than Dungeons and Dragons for that kind of campaign, so that's kind of another disconnect for me personally, and probably for the author here. I really do think it was refreshing that Lazarus chimed in, so we kind of got 2 perspectives. They helped fill in some of the gaps, which is just always a sign when you're reading one of these RPG horror stories. You never get the complete picture, maybe because the author is either an unreliable narrator or they just forgot to throw in a detail that helps you see the whole story in a new light. It's always fun reading what you guys have to say. I think originally I was planning a longer story for this week. That one's still coming. It's probably going to be out next week, so look forward to that. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and hype it, as it really helps the channel grow, and subscribe to become a member if you haven't already. As always, I hope to see you in the next video. Farewell for now.